Rolapp's proposed overhaul, targeted for full implementation by 2028, rests on three escalating changes that together reshape who gets to play, how often, and for what stakes. The first is field size. Under the new model, a full field event played on a single golf course would shrink from 156 players to 144, and full field events played before daylight saving time would shrink further, from 132 players to 120. Tournaments spread across multiple courses would keep their 156-player fields for now. Rolapp has described the goal as more consistent fields, telling reporters at the Players' Championship in March 2026 that the Tour is targeting something closer to 120-player fields with a cut because it helps fans know who they will see. The second change cuts even deeper into player livelihoods. Starting with the 2026 season, only the top 100 finishers in the FedEx Cup standings retain full PGA Tour status for the following year, down from the previous threshold of the top 125. In practical terms, 25 players who would have kept their tour cards under the old system lose them under the new one, though those affected retain conditional status rather than losing tour access entirely. 50 of the 100 available cards for the upcoming season were already locked in by players who advanced to the BMW Championship during the regular season, leaving the rest of the membership fighting over a shrinking number of remaining spots. Under the broader restructuring first detailed by Rolapp, the Tour would eventually move to two competitive tracks, a top tier of roughly 16 tournaments outside the majors and postseason, carrying fields of 120 to 130 players, and a second tier for players still working toward that top tier, with smaller purses and less title sponsor investment. Whether a player could move up mid-season by stringing together strong results remained, as of the announcement, still under discussion. The Tour's stated justification for both changes has centered on pace of play. Players did not accept that explanation quietly. Lucas Glover, the 2009 U.S. Open champion, called the process behind the decision a series of cool kid meetings, and said bluntly, hiding behind pace of play, I think challenges our intelligence. They think we're stupid. Matt Fitzpatrick, the 2022 U.S. Open champion, backed him publicly, posting that Glover was so right, and calling it pathetic that pace of play is spoken about every year and nothing ever gets done. Layered on top of the field and card cuts is a separate, unrelated but equally disruptive change, the golf ball rollback. The USGA and the R&A, golf's two global governing bodies, jointly finalized new ball testing standards that take effect for elite competition in January 2028, with recreational golfers following by 2030. The testing conditions move from a 120 miles per hour club head speed to 125 miles per hour, which is expected to cut the longest hitters' drives by roughly 13 to 15 yards, with average tour pros losing somewhere between 9 and 11 yards. The stated rationale is course preservation and long-term sustainability, as increasing distance keeps forcing historic courses to be lengthened or reconfigured. Both the PGA Tour and the PGA of America publicly opposed the rollback-specific parameters even as they conceded some limit was needed. The player reaction to the rollback split the locker room rather than uniting it. Justin Thomas and Bryson DeChambeau have voiced opposition to the change, arguing it penalizes the game's most explosive talents. Rory McIlroy, by contrast, has been supportive of reining in distance, arguing it protects the integrity of classic golf courses. That divide matters because it shows this rebellion isn't simply players versus management, it's also players against each other on what the sport should look like going forward. Scottie Scheffler, the world number one, does not complain often, which is exactly why his frustration carries weight when it surfaces. His core objection isn't really about distance or field size. It's about randomness replacing skill as the deciding factor in major championships. The clearest example came at the 2025 PGA Championship at Quail Hollow Club in Charlotte. Heavy rain in the days before the tournament left fairways soft, and mud clung to golf balls hit into the short grass. The night before the first round, the PGA of America announced there would be no preferred lies, stating the turf was outstanding and drying by the hour. On the par 4 16th hole, Scheffler and playing partner Xander Schauffele both found the fairway with their tee shots, then watched their approach shots hook violently into the water because of mud on the ball, leading to matching double bogeys. Scheffler said afterward, "It's one of those deals where it's frustrating to hit the ball in the middle of the fairway and get mud on it and have no idea where it's going to go. I understand it's part of the game, but there's nothing more frustrating for a player." He added pointedly, "I don't make the rules." A second example arrived at the 2026 PGA Championship at Randomness Golf Club, won unexpectedly by England's Aaron Rai, ranked 44th in the world entering the week. Rai closed with a final round 65 to win by 3 shots, finishing at 9 under, becoming the first English-born golfer to win the tournament since 1919. 22 players were within 4 shots of the lead heading into the final round, a leaderboard so bunched that the winner effectively emerged from chaos rather than clear dominance, feeding directly into Scheffler's argument that inconsistent setups are turning skill competitions into lotteries. When the world number one questions fairness this directly and this repeatedly, it signals something the sport has to take seriously. 7 players have become the public face of this pushback, each carrying a distinct grievance. Rory McIlroy has been the loudest and most direct voice. Speaking ahead of the 2026 US Open, he said of the tour's proposed 2-track system, Track 2 is a glorified Corn Ferry event, referencing the tour's developmental circuit, and added, "As they've done all this work, you start to realize that the way the tour was before LIV came along was actually pretty good. It was a pretty good structure, and everything sort of worked pretty well." Lucas Glover has repeatedly attacked the pace-of-play justification for field and card cuts as insulting to players' intelligence, framing the decision as leadership protecting a handful of star names rather than the broader membership. Matt Fitzpatrick has echoed and amplified Glover's criticism publicly, expressing frustration that the same pace-of-play conversation recurs every year without the tour producing a real solution. Jordan Spieth has a personal stake in preserving traditional events, including tournaments tied to his own history on tour, which face reclassification or reduced stature under the new tiered structure. Spieth has played in and won events that could be pushed into the tour's lower competitive tier under the proposed schedule, and has pressed leadership on what that reclassification would mean for tournament purses, sponsor commitments, and player fields at those events going forward. Scottie Scheffler carries a related concern. His hometown event, the tournament in the Dallas area he has deep ties to, risks losing elite status if it isn't classified into the top competitive tier. For a player whose schedule has long included that event out of loyalty rather than obligation, seeing it potentially demoted under a system built around media markets and sponsor dollars struck a personal chord separate from his broader complaints about fairness in major championship setups. Maverick McNeely, one of the younger voices in this group, has pushed for players retaining freedom to choose their own schedules rather than having commitments dictated from above, a generational tension between a league-style structure and golf's traditional independence. As a player who sits on tour player committees representing the interests of the broader membership rather than only the elite tier, McNeely has argued that any new structure needs input from players across the ranking spectrum, not only the handful of stars whose schedules the tour is most eager to lock in. Stuart Sink, a veteran who has played across multiple eras of the sport, has voiced broader unease about the direction leadership is taking the tour, representing longtime players watching the sport's fundamental structure change beneath them. Having competed through the tour's shift from a single, largely uniform schedule to the current signature event model, Sink has cautioned that a further restructuring risks eroding the meritocratic path that let lesser-known players climb into contention, a path he benefited from earlier in his own career. 7 different reasons, 1 shared belief, that decision-makers building this new structure do not fully understand what life as a touring professional actually requires. Player pushback moved beyond press conferences into private organizing. Players compared notes across group texts and closed-door meetings, then took their concerns directly to tour leadership, in some cases proposing alternative structures to the field and card cuts. The governance side of this fight has its own history of turmoil. Rory McIlroy resigned from the PGA Tour Policy Board in November 2023, citing personal and professional commitments after serving as one of the tour's most visible defenders during its legal war with LIV Golf. Roughly 6 months later, in May 2024, board member Jimmy Dunn, one of the architects of the framework agreement with Saudi Arabia's Public Investment Fund, resigned as well, writing in his resignation letter that no meaningful progress has been made towards a transaction with PIF and that my role is utterly superfluous now that player directors outnumbered independent directors on the board. McIlroy called Dunn's departure a huge loss for the PGA Tour and said it left the tour in a worse place because of it. Glover, reacting to the same news, said flatly, "Tour players play golf. Businessmen run business. They don't tell us how to hit 7 irons." Rolapp has pushed back directly on player criticism of the current plan. Responding to McIlroy's Corn Ferry comparison, he told reporters at TPC River Highlands, "I had a chance to speak with Rory today. We talked a bit about it, and clarified that the tour currently runs 47 events serving roughly 230 players, insisting the new structure would preserve that same event count rather than shrinking opportunity as critics feared." Even so, Rolapp has been careful to describe the plan as unfinished, saying earlier in the process, "It is by no means a baked cake. These are simple areas we are starting to see a meaningful consensus." The result of the pushback so far is a partial win for players. Implementation has been pushed to 2028 rather than rushed through, and players have secured a greater voice in shaping the final details. It is not a clean victory. Rolapp remains in charge, the ball rollback is still coming, and the two-track system is still scheduled to arrive eventually. In a twist that added irony to the entire conflict, the players resisting distance-reducing changes from golf's governing bodies had to compete in a major championship run by one of those same bodies just weeks after the loudest public clashes with Rolapp. The 2026 U.S. Open was played at Shinnecock Hills Golf Club in Southampton, New York, from June 18 to 21, marking the course's first U.S. Open appearance since Brooks Koepka won there in 2018. That 2018 championship is still cited across the sport as a cautionary tale in golf course setup. Firm, fast conditions combined with difficult hole locations pushed scores so high during the third round that several players openly criticized the USGA for losing control of the golf course, turning a skills competition into a survival exercise. Shinnecock's reputation as a punishing, chaos-prone test made the 2026 return the exact scenario Scheffler had been warning about all year, a setup where a gust of wind, a firm green, or a bad bounce can swallow skill entirely. The stakes for Scottie Scheffler personally could not have been higher. A win at Shinnecock would have completed the career Grand Slam, making him only the 7th player in history to win all 4 professional majors, and just the 4th to complete the feat on his first attempt. The final round fell on June 21, 2026, which was both Father's Day and Scheffler's 30th birthday. Before the round, Scheffler said, "I think it's appropriate to understand what's at stake. I've worked really hard for a long time to have a chance to win golf tournaments and win major championships." Scheffler entered the final round 6 shots behind 54-hole leader Wyndham Clark and shot a final round 1 over 71, making only 2 birdies over the closing 18 holes. He actually outplayed Clark by 2 shots head-to-head in their final pairing, but the deficit was too large to overcome. Clark held on to win by 1 shot over Sam Burns, claiming his second major title in 4 years, while Scheffler finished runner-up and will have to wait until the U.S. Open returns to Pebble Beach for his next attempt at the career Grand Slam. Scheffler reflected afterward, "I felt close again. It's just little things here and there." The irony he had warned about all year, a punishing, unpredictable setup determining outcomes at the highest level, played out in the same tournament where his own history was on the line, even if the final margin came down to execution rather than misfortune. Regardless of how the power struggle between players and leadership resolves, the PGA Tour in 2028 will look structurally different from the tour that exists today: smaller fields, fewer guaranteed cards, a 2-track competitive system, and a shorter golf ball. The tension between players voicing frustration in press conferences and proving their case on the course remains unresolved, and it will keep resurfacing at every major championship between now and the changes taking full effect.